Experts are now telling us that we are finally getting close. And this is good news because now this means that the risk that has been placed on the United States and the American people is starting to go away. So, I will address what's going on here, why this is really good news, what is going on regarding Washington, D.C., and how tens of thousands of people will be surging upon Washington, D.C. Again, this is good news. So, I will address all this in today's video. All I ask is you spend just 2 seconds, go ahead and hit that like button, and let's begin. So first off, how can millions of people essentially be saved? Well, it's actually pretty easy. The first thing that we are being told is that Hamas is actually getting very, very close to losing this war with Israel. Israel is now putting tanks in the city of Gaza. They are now so close to the Hamas leaders, to all the tunnels, that even when Israeli troops are walking in the tunnels, they can hear the tanks overhead. We've talked about this the other day. We talked about how there are now reports and photos and videos of inside the tunnels. And some of these tunnels lead to the basements of hospitals. Well, Israel knows this. Israeli troops are finding these tunnels. And this is causing Hamas to go and negotiate a little bit more. Okay, look at this. It says Hamas's armed wing says it is ready to free 70 Israeli hostages in return for a 5-day ceasefire. Just so you know, a little bit later last week, we heard that Hamas's armed wing said they would negotiate and they were willing to give 50 Israeli hostages for a 5-day ceasefire. Israel shot that idea down and said no. One of the things that they wanted to do, they wanted to send back the hostages that were children, women, elderly, people that were sick. They didn't want anyone to die. Okay? So they were going to send them back in exchange for a 5-day truce. Here's where, and this is going through a Qatari mediator. But what's happening now is we are now starting to see Israel question whether or not they need to, not should, but need to negotiate with Hamas. And the reason for this is because Hamas is likely upping their offer to get Israel to stop, to pretty much pull out, send in additional humanitarian aid, and hopefully, but according to experts, Hamas would then be able to move around, to do something to try to slow down Israel. This is one of the reasons why Israel does not want to agree to this ceasefire. However, there are a lot of people that are not condoning this. Okay? A lot of people that are worried because of hate around the world. I want to show you this. In Washington, D.C., at Washington, D.C.'s National Mall, okay, and this is going to happen later on today. It says, March for Israel, rally to condemn rising anti-Semitism at D.C.'s National Mall. The security level for the event, expected to attract tens of thousands of supporters, was raised to the highest designation amid a backdrop of growing bias incidents nationwide. We are starting to see this, okay? And this is going to be one of the largest marches. But in this article from NBC News, they are saying that the security level for this event had to be raised to the highest designation. Okay. Now, I bring this up because it's not just people in Israel that are fighting for their own rights. It's not just people in Gaza that are fighting for their rights as well and worried about just their livelihoods. People all across the world are. We even know Democratic staffers. They are revolting against their bosses in Congress because they say they're not listening to their constituents. They're just not listening because they have other plans. Now, here's what we do know. The United States continues to send about $3.8 billion to Israel every single year. This is part of their budget, and it gets sent out, and nobody really ever questioned it. Now people are questioning it. What are we going to do with that $3.8 billion? Are we still going to be sending it over to them? Do they absolutely need it? Well, some say no. But what's happening right now is there's a question whether or not Israel will be able to withstand another attack if it happens. Well, here's what Israelis are doing. According to CNN, it says Israelis are arming up in the aftermath of Hamas's attack. Some are worried it is playing to the far right's vision of the country. So what's actually happening is there are people that are sending out, giving out weapons. Okay, let's just read this really quick. It says, behind tables laden with more than 50 assault rifles, Israel's far-right national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, smiled at a crowd of people who had come to the coastal city of Caesarea for a ceremony to receive the firearms. Says the divisive politician has been crisscrossing Israel in the past weeks, handing out guns to civilian members of security squads as he expands Israeli citizens' access to guns in the wake of Hamas's attack last month. The purpose of this, the aim, according to the Ministry of National Security, is to create teams to respond to future terror incidents. The reason I bring this up is because experts now believe that there will be more attacks on Israel. And it's likely going to come, it could come from Hamas. It also could come from other groups, okay? But the reason why this is so important is because now Israel sees where they need additional help, okay? They lacked some defense. So I bring this up because now we're being asked, is the United States part of this? Is the United States funding a potential new war? Are we funding sending firearms to civilians? Right? Is this something that we're doing? Well, I don't know. And that's where some lawmakers say we need more answers. Before we start sending out additional $3.8 billion, let's get more answers. But the good news is we are now getting closer. We're closer to a deal to send back hostages from Hamas. We're also closer to a deal for government funding. This is a big one. Hey, this is another big one because this is also going to save millions of lives. Because what we are hearing right now is that millions of lives could potentially be saved simply because the U.S. will not be drawn into another war. So in this bill, which according to House Speaker Mike Johnson, he's predicting that they will have bipartisan support or a bipartisan agreement to fund the government and avoid a shutdown. This is really good news. But inside this bill, is there going to be any additional funding for Israel or Ukraine? The answer is no. There's no additional funding. There's also no cuts to our government funding, which is something that Democrats absolutely would have just went ballistic if there was a cut of 1% or 30%. Okay, they would not have tolerated that. But the reason why this is such a big deal is because now the world is going to look at President Biden saying, yes, we do support Israel. We stand behind Israel's rights to defend itself. But we are not going to give them $14.3 billion in funding. We're not just going to hand out $14.3 billion to Israel because they need additional help. We're not going to do it. And this is something that the world is actually in support of. That Israel doesn't need any money from the United States. The United States doesn't need to jump into this war. The United States needs to stay in their spot, stay in their place, avoid any additional conflicts with Iran, which could potentially widen the war. Again, experts say we are now getting close. We're very close to getting these deals done, where Israel can overtake Hamas. Hamas sends back all their hostages, or Israeli troops go and find those hostages and bring them back themselves without a ceasefire. Okay, which also means the people of Gaza could be spared. There'd be no more missiles if all the hostages get returned. That would be huge. Now, let's talk about this government funding bill. It says House Speaker Mike Johnson said he expects to win bipartisan support backing Tuesday for his laddered continuing resolution to fund the government and avoid a shutdown. It says the plan would fund some federal agencies until mid-January and the others through early February, but does not contain any steep spending cuts. That is huge. No spending cuts. It says if it clears the House, the measure expected to win support in the Senate. President Joe Biden has also signaled he'd be open to signing it. Okay, that's good news there. But here's what you need to keep in mind. It's going to require Democrats to jump on board with him. This will not pass with just Republicans, because some Republicans have already stated they would not support this bill. Okay, so at this time, that is where things are at, that we are getting closer to getting a deal done. My guess is we will have this deal done by Friday, which it has to be done by the end of business day on Friday, or else government would shut down on Saturday. So that's where we're at. But again, if you guys have any questions, please ask your questions down in the comment section below. Again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.